it's absolutely stunning. I think the first thing that really hit me was how little immigration, really since early Irish cinema, has been explored.
I know.
And especially from a female
Oh,
perspective.
not at all. Yeah.
Not really at all that
Yeah.
I can recall at all.
Yeah.
So how important then was it that she's female, essentially?
I think that was the thing that felt fresh
Yeah.
about the story. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I think that the story itself that's in Callum's novel is a profoundly important story for the country, and immigration feels like a topic that we all kind of know about, and that's partly because nearly every household in the country has some kind of relationship to it directly. But actually, we haven't seen the story told. We've seen sort of versions of it on screen, very well done in different formats, like bits of Irish America or in America.
Yeah.
The end of Angela's Ashes, they all go away to America, you know. But to do it properly, full on, in a way which isn't melodramatic as well, which is just a story about somebody trying to get on with their life, which is the reality of the vast majority of people who left this country.
Well, absolutely. Well, I think that's kind of one of the most important things as well in the film is the slow emotional journey really that she undertakes.
Yeah.
You know, you're experiencing it with her essentially.
Yeah.
Why do you think, I suppose now was the crucial timing? I mean, the novel obviously was written set in the 50s. Why 60 years later now will it resonate? Is it because we are coming out of a global recession? It's probably
there's a bit of that.
Yeah.
There's a bit of that. But actually, the truth is, I don't actually think immigration's ever gone away.
It's not really.
Is the
No,
truth. You know, I mean, you know, we sort of all got ahead of ourselves and thought, oh no, it's the reverse. It's immigration we have now. You know, it has been in lots of ways the defining fact of Irish life for the last 150 years. So that's one reason why. You know, I also think it's just this is partly the way we try to approach it and actually realizing it. It's, you know, we did all our homework very carefully on the period elements. We got all of that right, and the authenticity was everything for me. And there's not a foot to be put wrong in everything. But then I insisted that we throw it away. That it wasn't a period film which is about announcing its periodness.
No,
right? Yeah. What was important to me was emotional immediacy in the film, and that actually one would feel a degree of proximity to Eilish, literally in the case of the camera, right, and us emotionally watching it. That you're,
absolutely.
You know,
I mean,
it's a film about a face.
In close-ups, really, most of the time, really, isn't she?
It's the second shot of the film. The door opens, you're on her face, and you walk down the street with her. I mean, it's that, you know, and that was the way I wanted to open the film. You know, and then that was almost too abrupt. So we did put in what was a more conventional establisher at the start, but that was never the intention. You know, so it was to be that. So, in a sense, I wanted that kind of immediacy to be the thing that was foregrounded rather than the period elements. But, of course, you know, as you know, there's a sort of truism, which is the more specific you get a world in a particular time right, the greater the chance you have of that being universal. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we played a game of trying to let images in there, which would nudge us to immigration in the 80s or now, you know, you would have just ruptured the fabric of the original piece. Yeah. So, by trying to get it exactly right for itself, but being light with the period, I hope that it would have a reach to people watching it now. And, you know, whatever generation you are, you'll find a different sort of echo in there. It might be, you know, a lot of people related to grandparents.
Absolutely,
People who have immigrated.
Even yourself, myself included. Absolutely,
Whereas now a lot of people think of brothers and sisters. Or, you know, it's a really primal story of a young person heading off to another country with little more than a suitcase.
Well, that kind of leads me nicely on to actually what struck me as well is there's an embracement of, I suppose, different ethnicities really rather than, you know, concrete, I suppose, especially particularly for an American audience. Sometimes directors tend to rely on stereotypes because there's an immediate identification. This is almost like a celebration of different ethnicities without falling into that kind of stereotype. You know, you care very much about the characters because it is universal. You know, it's something that we can all resonate with, by the Irish obviously in particular. There is though a sense of, I suppose, when you think about, you know, Irish emigration, there's a darkness that possibly is, you know, more profound in the novel. There's a darkness, there's a kind of an ambiguity, there's an irony kind of seeping through his novel that kind of is touched upon when she, you know, moves over to New York, but it's inherently more a positive embracing really of emigration, whereas when she comes back she could easily settle in Ireland just as much as she could go back to America. Whereas I know from experience myself, when I came back here, I struggled to adjust. You know, it was a wrong move. I know lots of people in that same boat. But it's a very kind of positive portrayal of emigration that really, I suppose, home is where you make it. Home is where the heart is. I mean, was that conscious not to have this negative connotations with emigration, that the shame, I suppose, that it kind of conjured up when people do leave. There's a sense of shame that I suppose you failed your family, but you're also leaving behind people, who don't have that opportunity to go as well.
There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
Question. So let me say, sorry, kind of pick my way through, because you're absolutely right. There's some very interesting stuff in there, right? Which is that I think that what I loved about the book and what we try to hold on to the film is complexity, right? Which is to not take a single stance or a viewpoint on it. And yes, maybe there is a positive reflection on immigration, okay? And I'll give you two shots as an example. There's one where she walks through that doorway at the immigration hall and it bleaches out into white and the music swells, and you get a feeling that in her a profound moment has just happened, and it's like she's in the new land. 10 minutes later, another door opens and in walks some old guys into the hall. Christmas Day, right? And her face as she watches that, she just goes quite naively, why don't they just go home, right? That's the other side of it. Now, the whole film is from her point of view, okay? So there is no way in which I wanted to come in there and waving a flag and going, you see, everybody, but she might have, there's a darkness, that's not the point. You show it in specific slivers, which actually where her eyes get opened to the fact that it's not just about her, that there's actually this whole other narrative to do with people for who life was much harder for, and at the end point of their life, having worked their whole lives in America, there's nothing for them. They're not living on anything, and they can't go home, right? Absolutely. So in there is imbued the shame and the sadness, and they carry all that sadness that she does. They're listening to that song. She's got tears in her eyes. They've got tears in their eyes. There's nothing separating them, okay, other than fortune, and just she's lucky enough to have Father Flood is helping them as well. So I'm not sure that, what we haven't done is point the darkness out, right? It is in there, but it's subtle. In the end of the film, there is a last beat, which, as you know, the novel finishes with her on the train. She closes her eyes and thinks no more about it. The tail end of making a film of it, which is to say dramatizing a piece of prose, Nick and I felt that something needed to be dialed up towards the end of the film, because it wouldn't play dramatically. And it's not about can we make it happier, it needed to be more conclusive, okay? So the scene with Nettles Kelly in the book is one of which is about shame, and it scares Eilish. She runs away and she sort of has to go back to America because her secret is about to be exposed. She doesn't confront her back. But the film becomes much more about a portrait of a young woman forming herself. And from the start, she has no power over her own life at all. She's sent to America by Father Flood and her sister. But whereas we felt, the end point of that journey, she does need to be actually a little bit more in control of it, or else there's a danger in which she could be punished for something. And we didn't want that. I wanted it, and also it felt more contemporary for somebody to actually go, okay, this is my secret. What's your problem? The small town meanness, right, that Nettles Kelly represents, the petty, grubby, in Yeats's phrase, fumbling in the till, that kind of, and the moral, self-appointed moral guardian nature of her, which is, I know what your secret is. The power she has needs to be destroyed in order for a film, for her, she has to become the antagonist instead of and Eilish is the protagonist. So that was a dramaturgical problem to be solved, and we dialed it up in that scene. And then she needed to be sent back to America, I felt, and Nick did. It was, his was the first instinct about that, because if you left her on the train with that ambivalence, having followed her all the way through that journey, you would leave an audience in places like, what? We did actually need to go, no, fuck it, this is it, and you just choose where your life is. But it's not a happy ending, because you cannot look at that scene with her mother, where it is heartbreaking, and her mother says to her, I'm going to say goodbye to you now. I'm going to say goodbye to you once, and maybe you'll write to me about your husband. And it's goodbye. It's like something is severed there, right? And then you watch the effect on Jim Donald Gleeson just reading, and a beautiful piece of acting, but it looks like he's collapsing inside, right? That you choose something in life, and if it's a proper adult choice, it's not about like a sort of an advertising caption, just choose what you want and everything's fine. No, choosing something in life properly means choosing not to have all those other things, right? And she is at that point severing whole parts of herself, okay, and choosing to make good with the life. That has a lot of pain there. There's a lot that's cost her. She's talking to the young girl, she's going, you're going to feel so homesick you will want to die, but it won't kill you. That for me is, there's a lot of allusion to the fact that it's tough as fuck, but you'll be fine,
Yeah.
is the point.
Yeah.
So
And how important was it?
it's the difference between happy ending and this sort of
Yeah.
hope, right? Which is a different thing, which is toughness. Get on with it.
And Saoirse Ronan herself has kind of spoken about how really the film probably came at a right time when she herself, I think, was moving over to the UK
Yes.
permanently. So, she was obviously able to tap into that.
Big time. Yeah.
Had you her in mind whenever you and Nick were probably sitting down to discuss the screenplay in this? Or?
I came to the project. I'd read the book a few years ago for pleasure, and then there was another director, another actor, circling it for a long time. So it came to me after they decided they weren't going to do it. In fact, there were a few directors, and at one point Mike Nichols was going to do it.
Right.
When it came my way, and it was sort of finally a blank slate casting-wise that I could, which was immediately after I was attached to it, Saoirse was the immediate choice, no question. Now, she was the exact right age for it, and also authenticity was everything to me. I mean, it felt like I cannot do this film with an American actor in the middle, or which is where it would have been. It has to be authentic, and she'd proven herself so amazingly as a child actress, obviously, from everything from Atonement and a young adult actor, growing up in lots of ways, but had yet to give a sort of powerhouse emotional performance in anything. Even in The Lovely Bones, it was still quite, it's not, she hasn't done what she's been doing in this. So I went to meet her, and we talked about it, and just had the instinct that, she would have this sort of, she understood it, she really did understand, she loved the book, loved the script. And then what happened was, between the point of us meeting and the point of us shooting, which was about a year, we had lunch about 2 weeks before we were due to start shooting, and it was in London. And she was very, very homesick. She had moved to London, had got a flat, and had got a boyfriend, and a bit of life had happened to her. And she's incredibly centred, Saoirse, as a young. Did you meet her?
No, not yet. No.
She's an astonishing force of nature, and she's been going to London since she was little, and she's well enough disposed in her life financially to be able to fly home. She's got a mobile phone. She can talk to her mother for 2 hours every day. She can, there's none of the things that age. But she was floored by homesickness and couldn't figure out. And here's the interesting thing: is that it's not really just about economic deprivation. What Colm gets right, it's a more almost existential, emotional thing that happens when you leave home. You go to a new country, and no matter what conditions you are in there, it's not home for you where you are. And when you go back home, you're not from there either
Well,
anymore.
it's not necessarily either. There's sort of that kind of whole grey area between the nostalgia when you're away and then the alienation that when you're home. I mean, I myself have felt that no matter where I
Everybody understands that state instinctively. But Colm put words on it. Now, you're playing with a character who doesn't understand it, and Saoirse was a person who didn't understand. She was kind of, because she said to me, that, and I moved to London when I was 27, so by this stage I'd been there for sort of 15 years or whatever. She said, does it get easier? Does it get easier? I said, absolutely it does, It never goes away, because it's not home. But it's where you make your home, and in lots of ways that's about people, rather than, the stuff of home, where the things that you grew up around can have a very strong pull, and that was one of the things we tried to get, obviously, into the film when she goes back home, the beach, the familiarity of her room, of like just being back home, having a pull on her, the ease of it. So yes, she was in a place when we started shooting which was not quite sure where she was at in life and in the world, where that thing of I don't know if I have a home anymore. It was just naturally bubbling in her. And it's quite a subtle emotion. And if you had an actor who didn't quite understand that, they'd have had to be manufacturing it from other things. She didn't. She was able to hit the target, the bullseye of that exact place, and the pain that again, to go back to your point, that it's a positive portrayal of immigration. I would say the first 20 minutes that she goes through, right from the boat, the awfulness of the boat journey, through to this sort of fear of those other girls around the table at first, until they're nice to her later on. The loneliness when the letters come, the awfulness of dealing with that job, and not being able to articulate what's wrong with her. I don't know that that's a positive view. I mean, that's what it is. It's like a keyhole description. It's getting something in the minutiae of how daily life is really hard. hard.
I
if
think
you're
it probably goes
homesick.
back to what I was saying about the slow emotional development.
Yeah.
Yes, you do. You have it, nuanced in the background. It's almost like if you stick it out, you will eventually, do you know what I mean, find a sense of home in this place.
Yes, you will.
So it does sort of have that, I suppose,
Yep.
element of positivity. How much pressure is there under you, if at all, when you're adapting a very well loaded book? Have you got Colin and the book in mind, or can you just take complete ownership of it? And is there sort of responsibility to him, or does he pass the reins over to you, if you like?
Both.
Yeah.
I mean, he did. He was very hands off with Nick in the adaptation, very hands off with me. We met, we had lunch, and we had a great conversation about The Dead, the John Huston film, which he loves. And he was subtly making a point about how beautifully cast that film was, right?
Yeah.
And that every last small part in that film had been sort of lovingly cast. Now, it was completely my intention to do the same. There was no question that I was going to make an argument against what.
Yeah.
But that was one thing, is that is sort of, he wanted to know that the agenda was about getting this thing really right. He didn't really know Saoirse's work, but he was excited that she was a potential for who was there. And I think we had just attached Donald Gleeson to it by that point. And, I think he thought, he was amazed when he saw Donald, because Donald, he looked so different.
He did, yeah.
Than anything he's
absolutely.
done. So I think there was a bit of a journey there that he was kind of, didn't quite know what that would be like, but never would allude to any nervousness about it if there was.
Yeah.
He's just too much of a gentleman, really,
Yeah.
and too trusting in a way. So no, he was completely hands off. He had two tiny notes for Nick Hornby. One which is, it's mammy instead of mummy.
Right, yeah.
And it's rashers instead of rashers of bacon. Literally, he said, other than that, beautiful screenplay, good luck.
Wonderful.
He came and visited us on set because we invited him, as it were, to come and join us, and he had a walk-on part in one scene, and then had nothing to do with it again until we showed him the finished cut of the film before it had the score on it and everything. And he didn't have a single note. I mean, he was just delighted.
You can't get a better compliment than that,
So,
really, can
no,
you?
he was great. It was the
Yeah.
most easeful. But to go back to the second part of your question, how much pressure is there on the book, as it were, on your sense of what you're doing? Huge. I mean, because people would say, "What are you doing?" Brooklyn go, "Oh my God, I love that book." That's quite a hard one to adapt. And you go,
Yeah.
because a lot of people read the book as well and think, God, it's quite internal. It's not an easy. There's very little happens in it on one level. Of course, I think it's massively dramatic. It's just drama with a small d. It's as you say, the slow burn. It's that rather than. And what Nick held on to in the screenplay, which would have been disastrous if he hadn't, was the refusal to over-dramatize it, the refusal to inject events in the first half an hour of the film because it needs a bit of pumping up. And there were times when people might have wanted that to finance yourself. You know what I mean? There's always those conversations where you have to very gently go, not quite the film we're making. So there was that responsibility. If I'm honest, the even bigger responsibility past it, like lurking like this huge sort of silent mass behind us when we're making the film, was the wish to get it right for every single person who had emigrated, all through those generations. It was sort of, that's why it had to be emotionally front foot. It had to be, and never sentimental, emotional, and like shamelessly emotional. Just, it has to be, you feel what she feels. And if you can get an audience to do that, then we have something maybe that's a bit special. So, that was the responsibility that both me and actually Saoirse, we used to talk about it a lot on set, and you felt it really, in particular on that day, that Christmas Day scene when we shot it with all those old guys. I don't know, it's like a ghost scene, that scene, and it was very haunting because it was just a couple of hundred representing thousands.
That's it, absolutely.
Yeah,
we've
so
all met them.
That's
Absolutely.
the responsibility I felt.
Perfect. Well, finally, what's next?
I'm afraid I don't know yet.
You don't
honestly,
know yet.
I don't know. I've got lots of stuff rumbling around.
Enjoying the whirlwind of.
I'm
what's going on with this?
on the Brooklyn train for another little bit until this rock rolls to the end of the hill, as it were, and I'm going to take a break. I mean, it's been a very busy year because I did, once we did Sundance with this, I went off and did 2 episodes of True Detective, and then went and did a play in Australia. So I've been away from home a lot. And
is home London now?
Home is London, yeah. No, indeed, and family is there, and a 4-year-old boy started school, so I want to be at home, certainly for the rest of the year.
Right. Well, the very best of luck. I love
Thank
this
you very
out.
much.
I think everybody will absolutely love it. As you said, anybody who can in any way resonate, it's their story up there on the screen. So
Thank you.
very best luck. Do you take any notice of the hype that goes out there when people start loading about Oscar?
It's hard not to because everybody
It is,
asks
isn't
me
it?
about it.
Yeah, I try
So
not to.
I
but,
don't. No,
you
no,
can't
that's fine.
help
That's
it,
fine.
yeah.
I don't email or Google any of that stuff myself
No.
because I just think that way is the sort of death lies down that road. But yeah, look, it's amazing. It's the first thing I've ever been involved in that's been discussed in that way. So it's sort of on that level, it's great that people are talking about it. You know, for all the obvious reasons, you think, oh God, is it just talking up an imminent disappointment, as it were?
Yeah.
And maybe it is, but it doesn't matter. It's like I think Saoirse deserves every award going. If I'm honest, I think that performance is an astonishing performance. So
Absolutely.
go for it, is what I say.
Yeah.
But I would hate, and I don't think this is going to happen. I would hate that chatter would overshadow why we made the film, which is actually it's a really fucking important story, and it's about something, and that's what I want people to take away from it. And
think
you know,
it
so
will.
far people are. It's
I
fine.
think so.
So
I think it will.
you know, anyway.
Yeah. Well, the very best luck, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
talking to Phil.
Nice to
Thank
talk
you
to you.
very much.
All right.